The police asked me to come identify my missing daughter, stay with me. They said the woman they found had my last name, and I only have one son. That sentence cracked my kitchen open. The kettle screamed. My toast burned. I remember thinking how stupid it was that breakfast kept happening when my life had just been yanked sideways. I'm telling this like a confession because that's what it feels like. I'm not proud of the way my mind sprinted ahead, drawing lines between old regrets and brand new terror. I'm 62, retired, knees shot, heart patched with a stent and a prayer. I've lived long enough to know that when the police call before noon, it's never about good news. They wouldn't say much. A woman, they said, unconscious when found, no ID, personal effects suggest a family connection. Then the kicker, her last name matches yours. I laughed, a short, ugly sound. I don't have a daughter, I told them. I've got one son, grown 40, lives 2 states away. That's it. There was a pause on the line, the kind that feels like a hand on your chest. Sir, the officer said, gentle but firm, we still need you to come in. I drove with both hands welded to the wheel, knuckles white, mind ricocheting. I thought of my wife, gone 8 years now, of the quiet deals couples make and then bury, of the one winter we almost split and didn't, of the box in the attic I never opened again. At the station, fluorescent lights hummed like they were judging me. A young detective slid a folder across the table. Before you see her, he said, we need to ask a few questions. They showed me a grainy still from a traffic cam. A woman crossing a street at dusk, coat too thin, hair pulled back like she meant business. She walked with a slight hitch, favoring her left side. That hitch punched me in the gut, because I knew it. I'd seen it once before, years ago, on a grainy VHS tape I pretended not to recognize. I told you, I said, my voice not quite mine. I don't have a daughter. The detective leaned back. Sir, he said, then help us understand why this woman has a birth certificate with your name on it and why it was filed the same year you and your wife nearly moved. I swallowed. The room felt smaller. The past, suddenly loud. Before we continue, I'd love to know if you VA subscribed to the channel Echoed Vengeance and if you enjoyed the video. Your support means the world to me. Also let me know where you're watching from. I always love hearing from my viewers. Now, let us continue. Take me to her, I said. I'll tell you what I can. And that's how the day I lost my certainty began. They led me down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, the kind of smell that tells you people wait here for answers they don't want. My shoes squeaked. Every step felt like I was walking into a version of myself I'd avoided for decades. The woman lay behind a glass partition in the infirmary, tubes, monitors, a thin blanket pulled to her collarbone, bruise blooming purple along her jaw. When I saw her face, my breath snagged not because she looked like me, but because she didn't. She had my wife's mouth, the same stubborn curve, the same way the upper lip tilted when she was angry or afraid. It was like someone had reached into my past and pulled out a feature I thought I'd buried with the coffin. The nurse asked, do you recognize her? I shook my head too fast. No, that was my first lie of the day. Or maybe the last lie of a very long stretch. They took me back to the interview room. The detective Harris, his badge said didn't push. He just slid photos across the table. A hospital bracelet with my last name printed clean and black, a locker key, a receipt from a pawn shop 10 miles from my old house. That pawn shop I said before I could stop myself. It used to sell guitars, on the corner by the tracks. Harris raised an eyebrow. You familiar with it? I used to be, I said. I'd been a mechanical engineer before retirement, spent 35 years measuring tolerances and reading stress fractures like tea leaves. My brain liked patterns. It still did. Harris leaned in. The woman was reported missing 3 days ago. No phone, no social media footprint we can find, but she's got documents that tie her to you. We need to know if there's something you're not telling us. I thought about my son, about how he called every Sunday and never asked about the past, about how proud I was of the man he became and how afraid I was of what this could do to him. There was a woman, I said slowly, choosing words like they could shatter. A long time ago, before my son was born. It didn't last. That's not what we're asking, Harris said. It's all I have, I shot back. They let me go home with a promise, don't leave town. I sat in my car afterward, engine off, hands shaking. I knew then that if the police were digging, they'd dig shallow. They always do. Timelines, paper, clean edges. I was trained to look deeper, to see what didn't line up, and somewhere between the station and my driveway, something ugly took root. If this woman was using my name, my history, then she wasn't just lost. She was hiding, and I needed to know why. I didn't sleep worth a damn that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her mouth, my wife's mouth, trying to say something through cracked lips and hospital tape. By morning, I was running on bad coffee and worse memories. Here S. The thing about being an engineer for most of your life, you don't stop troubleshooting just because you retire. Your brain stays wired to ask why and how and what doesn't add up. And buddy, nothing about this situation added up. So I did what I've always done when life went sideways. I built a system. First stop was my garage. Same place I used to sneak into when my son was a teenager and I needed quiet. I pulled out my old drafting notebook, the one with yellowed pages and grease smudges. People think engineers just deal with machines. Truth is, we're pattern junkies. Give us chaos, and we'll hunt the structure hiding underneath. I started mapping timelines my marriage. The year we almost moved. The year my wife took that extended visit to her sister's place out west. Back then, I didn't ask questions. I was working overtime, chasing promotions, being a real company man. I told myself distance was normal, that marriage has seasons. Classic BS, we sell ourselves. Then I looked at the pawn shop receipt photo again. I drove there after lunch, wearing my old veteran's cap because it makes people chatty. Place hadn't changed much. Same cracked counter, same flickering neon sign. I struck up a conversation with the guy behind the register, asked about guitars, asked about foot traffic. Then I casually slid the receipt across the counter like it was no big deal. He squinted. Yeah, I remember her. Came in limping a little, tough as nails there, didn't want sympathy, sold a silver locket. My chest tightened. My wife had a silver locket. Family piece. Supposedly lost years ago. What did she look like? I asked. He shrugged. Mid-30s, maybe older. Hard to tell. Wore that don't mess with me face. You know the type. Yeah, I knew the type. On the way home, my son called bad timing, but life doesn't care. He joked about work, about his kid learning to ride a bike. Then he asked, "You okay, Dad? You sound off." I almost told him everything. Almost instead, I said, "Just tired. Getting old sucks." He laughed. "Tell me about it." I hung up feeling like dirt, because whatever this was, it was circling him too, whether he knew it or not. By evening, I had my next move. I requested public records legally, clean as a whistle, old housing permits, utility hookups, temporary addresses near where my wife's sister lived. That's when I found it, a small apartment lease. Same year, same last name as mine, different first name. And suddenly, the idea that I was being played didn't seem so crazy anymore. I stared at that lease like it was a cracked beam load calculation. Ignore it, and the whole structure collapses. Same last name, wrong first name, dated the year my wife went to help her sister. Yeah, sure, help. Here's where my profession kicks in. Engineers don't confront head-on, we test. We apply pressure where it won't snap back on us. Legal adjacent, clean hands, smart angles. I built a spreadsheet. Don't laugh. That thing was my war room. Addresses, dates, utilities, voter registrations, hospital admissions. You'd be shocked how much truth leaks out when you line things up instead of yelling at them. The woman, the maybe daughter, maybe scammer, had lived under 3 names in 15 years, or similar, or tied to me like a bad echo. That's not random, that's design. So yeah, I got pissed, real pissed, because if she was using my name, my wife's keepsakes, my damn history, then she wasn't just hiding, she was siphoning. And at my age, you don't mess with a man's legacy and expect him to sit on his hands. I visited the county assessor's office, old school place. Smells like dust and regret. I asked about property liens tied to my name. Just a retired guy checking records. Played the harmless card. Works like a charm. That's when I found it. A tiny property dispute. A storage unit. Paid in cash. Registered under guess what my last name. Delinquent. About to be auctioned. Bingo. Now here's the morally grey part. I didn't stop the auction. I let it ride. Then I bid on it myself. Totally legal. Felt shady as hell, but legal. When they cut the lock, my heart was pounding like I was back on the factory floor during my first safety audit. Inside, boxes, clothes, medical paperwork, and one thing that made my stomach drop, photos, not of me, of my son, school events, graduation, a candid shot of him holding his newborn, taken from a distance. Real creepy vibes. That's when my anger went nuclear, because curiosity is one thing, identity theft is another, but dragging my kid into this, nah. That crossed the line. I drove home shaking, sat in the driveway for a long minute, engine running, thinking about storming the hospital and demanding answers, thinking about calling the cops and blowing it all up. But engineers don't detonate blindly, we wait for the stress point. So I did one more thing. I left a note in the unit before they hauled the rest away. Simple, typed, no emotion. I know who you are. We need to talk. You don't have to hide. Then I waited. Because if she really was my daughter or thought she was, she'd come looking. And if she wasn't, well then the truth was about to punch back. She didn't call. She showed up. 3 days later, right as I was fixing a loose hinge on my back door. Old habit keeps the hands busy. Heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I knew before I looked up. Some part of me just knew. She stood at the end of my driveway, thinner than she'd looked behind the glass, bruise fading yellow now, walking with that same hitch, same eyes, but sharper, like someone who learned early that softness gets you burned. You shouldn't have bought that unit, she said. No, hello, no fear, just facts. I wiped my hands on a rag. You shouldn't have used my name. We stared at each other, wind kicked up. A wind chime clanged like it was nervous. I didn't steal it, she said. It was mine before it was yours. That line hit harder than any accusation. Then tell me, I said, because right now, this smells like a con. She laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. If I wanted to con you, old man, I'd have done it cleaner. I bristled at old man. Then she pulled out the locket. My wife's locket. She opened it. Inside was a photo I'd never seen before. A woman in a hospital bed, holding a newborn, a tired smile on her face. She looked younger than I ever remembered my wife being. That's my mother, she said. She died last year. Cancer. It was a long, ugly road. My knees almost buckled. That's my wife, I said. No, she shot back. That's the woman who gave me up because your perfect life couldn't take the hit. The silence stretched out between us, thick and suffocating. She told me everything. How my wife had been gone for months, not weeks. How she'd given birth in another state. How she'd signed papers I never saw, and sent money under the table for years. Cash, no trace. It was a ghost life, running parallel to mine. I didn't come for money, she said. I came because I needed medical history, genetic stuff, and then I got followed. Someone mugged me, took my phone. That's how I ended up unconscious. My rage just deflated, replaced by something much worse, understanding. And my son, I asked. The photos. She flinched. I wanted to see him, my brother, from far away. I didn't talk to him, I swear. That's when it all landed. She wasn't using my name to scam me. She was using it to survive. And suddenly, my grand revenge plan felt less like justice and more like a loaded weapon pointed at a wounded person. I'd been so sure I was the wronged one. Turns out, I was just late to the truth. After she said, "It, my brother," everything inside me just scrambled. The anger didn't disappear. It just lost its clean edges. It became messy, heavy, harder to swing around without hitting myself. I sat down on the porch steps like my legs had given up the argument. She stayed standing, arms crossed, ready to bolt, like every adult kid who learned early not to trust apologies. I didn't know, I said. It sounded weak. I hated that. If I'd known, you would have done what? She snapped. Left your wife. Blown up your son's life. Don't flatter yourself. That one stung because it might have been true. Here's the moral choke point nobody warns you about when you get older. You realize you can be both innocent and responsible. I didn't sign the papers. I didn't make the call. But I benefited from the silence. From not asking. From being too busy, too tired, too comfortable. I told her about the police. About the investigation. About how close this was to detonating in a way none of us could control. Her jaw tightened. I don't want him to know, she said. Not like this. And I don't want him hurt. I shot back. So now what? She looked at my garage, at the tools, the order, the neatness of a man who controls what he can. You're good at systems, she said quietly. Help me disappear again. That stopped me cold. Because here was the choice. Finish what I started, hand over everything, let the truth scorch the earth. Or use my skills to contain it, redirect it, protect my son from collateral damage he didn't sign up for. I thought about legacy. About what we leave behind, and how truth isn't always clean, and mercy isn't always noble. I can't erase you, I said, but I can slow things down. I used my engineering brain one last time. I coordinated with a legal aid clinic through an anonymous tip. I helped her refile documents under her original birth name. I flagged the storage unit mess as a clerical error. I gave the police just enough explanation to close the loop without opening new ones. It was legal, but gray, and exhausting. Before she left, she turned back. For what it's worth, she said, he looks like you when he laughs. I nodded, my throat tight. You walk like your mother. She didn't smile, but she didn't run either. And that's how I learned that mercy isn't soft. It's heavy as hell. That night, I stared at my phone like it was a live wire. One tap and my son's life would tilt forever. No rewind button, no safety rail. Just the truth falling where it may. I didn't call. Instead, I poured a drink I shouldn't have Dr. S orders be damned and sat at the kitchen table where my wife and I had eaten for 40 years. The same table where she'd laughed, lied, and loved me in equal measure. I kept replaying everything, hunting for the signs I missed. Engineers do that. We perform a post-failure analysis. We believe if we stare hard enough, we can find the exact bolt where things went wrong. The police called the next morning. Harris again. He said the woman had regained consciousness and declined to press charges. No leads. Case cooling off. You sure there's nothing else? He asked. Pretty sure, I said, and hated myself for how easy it sounded. After that, life tried to snap back into place. Mail arrived. The lawn needed mowing. The world didn't care that my understanding of my own marriage had just been completely redrawn. Then my son called. Dad, he said, his voice shaky. I got a weird message request. From a woman. Says she knows Mum. My heart dropped into my shoes. What did you do? I asked. Too sharp. I didn't answer. It just felt off. You okay? I closed my eyes. This was the moment. The moral crossroads. Protect him from pain now and risk bigger damage later, or trust him with the truth he never asked for. She does know your mum, I said carefully. From a long time ago, there was silence. Then, is this one of those conversations where I need to sit down? I exhaled. Yeah, it is. We talked for 2 hours. Not about everything. Not yet, but enough. I told him there were things about his mother I'd just learned myself. That people are complicated. That love and betrayal can sometimes share the same house. He didn't yell. That surprised me. He just sounded tired. I don't want my kids dragged into this, he said. Whatever it is, neither do I replied. When we hung up, I realized something painful and oddly comforting. This wasn't about revenge anymore or justice, or being right. It was about damage control in the late innings of life, and knowing when to stop swinging. After that call with my son, the house felt louder. Every tick of the clock hit like a judgment. I kept expecting my wife's voice from the hallway, telling me to stop pacing, that I was wearing a groove in the floor. Ghost habits die hard. I didn't hear from her for a week. Part of me hoped she'd vanished for good. Another part, the one I didn't like admitting, kept checking the driveway like a damn fool. Then an envelope showed up. No return address, just my name, written carefully, like she didn't want to spook me. Inside was a medical folder, copies, highlighted sections, genetic markers, heart issues, the same damn thing that put a stent in my chest 3 years back. At the bottom a note. It said, I won't contact him again, but he deserves to know this someday. So do his kids. I'm trusting you. Don't screw it up. No dad, no forgiveness. Just a responsibility dropped in my lap like a brick. I sat there a long time, thinking about how revenge had been so much simpler than stewardship, how anger feels powerful, but care is exhausting. That afternoon I drove to the river, the same spot where I used to take my son fishing when he was small. He never liked the quiet, always asked too many questions. Guess that part skipped a generation. I tossed a rock into the water and watched the ripples spread. That's the thing about truth, it never stays contained. You just choose when and how it moves. I realized then that my role wasn't judge or avenger. It was to be a buffer, an absorber. The guy who stands in the blast zone so the next generation doesn't get wrecked by shrapnel they did unturn. I called my cardiologist, set up updated testing, then I emailed my son, kept it light, told him family medical history matters more than pride. He replied with a thumbs up and a joke about me finally acting my age. Smart kid. As the sun dipped low, I took the locket out of my pocket, the one thing she'd left behind on purpose. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some stories don't end clean, they just settle. And for the first time since that police call, I felt something close to steady, not peace, but balance. But I wasn't done, not really. My engineering brain doesn't know done the way most people do. It knows patterns, anomalies, risk points, and weak links. And right now I had a loose thread dangling, threatening to unravel everything. I turned the house upside down. Old files, photo albums, letters my wife had written me in our first 10 years together. I wasn't snooping for gossip. I was tracing footprints, trying to see where her secret life intersected with ours. And more importantly, where it might still touch my son. She had left breadcrumbs, carefully hidden. Bank transfers under aliases, postmarked letters that were never sent, phone numbers on sticky notes in the back of drawers. Whoever she'd become, she'd left a trail intentionally designed for someone patient enough to follow it. That's when it hit me. Patience is a weapon, and I had years of it stacked like firewood. I set up a timeline on the kitchen wall with pins, string, and little sticky notes. Her movements, the hospital visits, the pawn shop transaction, the storage unit. Each one connected to something in our past, each intersecting with what my son thought was normal. From the outside, It probably looked insane, but to me, it was clarity, it was control. And control was exactly what I needed to decide whether to bring her back into the fold or let her ghost fade into the shadows where she'd survived for so long. I checked the photos from the storage unit again. Every single snapshot of my son from a distance. My stomach turned. The thought of this woman lurking so close, unrecognized, while my kid grew up, that should have made me furious. But it didn't. Not entirely. What I felt instead was responsibility. I couldn't yell, I couldn't chase, I had to anticipate. So I crafted a plan. A series of small legal moves, confirming her identity through public records, ensuring she had a safe path to access the information she needed, quietly controlling any leaks that could touch my son. It was tedious, slow work, almost meditative, but I liked the way it made me feel, useful, in control, not blindsided. Revenge had been fun in my head for about 5 minutes, but strategy, that was satisfying. Thank you for listening to my story. I stayed up late, tracing every angle. Patterns began to emerge. One weak point, a neighbor who had seen her limping and thought it odd. Another, a hospital clerk who misfiled her paperwork. And the most delicate, my own son, oblivious to all of it, but still vulnerable. I realized that if I pulled the wrong thread, the entire web would collapse. Lives would be damaged. Families shaken. My morality squirmed under the weight of that power. And yet, I couldn't just ignore it. Not when being smart gave me an edge. Not when I could make the invisible visible. Not when I could protect the boy who thought he had no sister at all. I leaned back in my chair, fingers interlaced. The wall of pins stared at me like a challenge. I whispered to myself, one wrong move, and it all blows up. One right move, and maybe, just maybe, we survive intact. It was a delicate game, and I had to play it perfectly. Here's the messed up thing nobody tells you about being this age. Power feels different. When you're young, power is loud. You flex it. You show it off. At 62, power is quiet. It's knowing you could wreck someone's world and choosing not to. Or at least, trying. I had enough info by then to blow the whole thing wide open. Names, dates, paper trails. If I dropped it all on the table, the cops would reopen the case. My son would get blindsided. And that woman, my maybe daughter, would be dragged into a spotlight she'd spent her whole life dodging. And yeah, part of me wanted that. Wanted her scared. Wanted answers paid for in discomfort. That's the ugly truth. Anyone who says they don't feel that pull is lying or hasn't lived long enough. But there was a line, and I could see it clear as day. I drove past my son's house that weekend. Didn't stop, just slowed down like a creep, and watched him in the yard with his kid, teaching him how to throw a baseball. Same awkward stance I had, same dumb grin. That's when it hit me, this wasn't about what I deserved to know anymore. It was about what he deserved not to carry. I went back home and shredded half my notes. Not the important stuff. The volatile stuff. Anything that could turn into a grenade if the wrong hands got it. Engineers call it risk mitigation. Normal people call it self-control. Either way, it felt like cutting off a limb. That night, she texted me. First time since the driveway. I'm leaving town for good. You won't hear from me again. No drama, no guilt trip, just a clean exit. I stared at the screen a long time. My thumbs hovered. I could stop her. I could invite her back. I could push for some picture-perfect closure people on TV love so damn much. Instead, I typed one sentence. If you ever need medical info for your kids, you know how to reach me. She replied with a single word. Thanks. That was it. No tears, no reunion, no miracle ending. Just two adults acknowledging damage and choosing not to add more. I slept better that night than I had since the police call. Not great, but better. The kind of sleep where your conscience doesn't sit on your chest like a brick. I realized something important then. Revenge would have felt good for a hot minute. Control would have felt powerful. But restraint, that felt earned. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. And for the first time in this whole mess, I knew exactly where mine was. Weeks passed, and life crept back into its usual rhythm. The lawn needed mowing, bills piled up, my knees complained every time I bent too fast. Nothing glamorous, nothing dramatic, just the slow tick of a house inhabited by memory and regret. I didn't hear from her again. Not a call, not a message, nothing. And part of me was grateful. Another part selfish, stubborn, wanted to see her walk up my driveway one more time, just to make sure she was really gone. I spent afternoons going through old photo albums. My wife's handwriting, now faded, smiled up at me from the margins. My son, as a kid, hair sticking up in every wrong direction. The woman I never knew, now a ghost in the corner of a frame I almost didn't notice. I realized something, maybe the harshest truth of all. Some secrets never die, they just wait. waiting for someone patient enough, curious enough, or reckless enough to uncover them. And what do you do with that knowledge? You carry it. You protect the ones you can. You let the rest fade into shadows where they belong. One afternoon, my son called, casual about work, about baseball with his kid. No questions about the woman, no curiosity, just normal, perfectly normal. I didn't tell him, not yet, not everything. Because some truths aren't gifts, they're burdens, and it's not my job to unload every weight on the next generation. I did, however, make a small adjustment in my files. The things she might need in the future all organized, easy to find, legal, safe, clean, a safety net she didn't know she had. And that was enough for me. Some might call it cowardice. Some might call it wisdom. I called it survival. And maybe a little bit of redemption. That night, I looked at the locket, sitting in my hand, quiet, weighty, not shiny, not polished. Just there, a symbol of a life complicated, tangled, and unfinished. I put it back in the drawer, not hidden, not discarded, just present, like the truth, like memory, like love that is messy but necessary. And for the first time in months, I let myself breathe, not free, not relieved, but steady. I understood finally that some endings aren't fireworks, some are just the faint glow of embers, warm enough to carry on. And sometimes, that has to be enough. Morning came slow, like it always does after nights that weigh heavy. The coffee tasted flat, but I drank it anyway. Habit, not pleasure. I glanced at the locket on the counter, caught the light, and thought about her my maybe daughter, the woman who had shaken my whole life awake. The house felt quieter than usual. No knocks, no phone calls, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of floorboards settling. I realized I was learning something new about silence. How heavy it can be, how it can carry grief, relief, guilt, and peace all at once. I called my son, just a regular call. Nothing about secrets or missing women or storage units. Just, hey, want to grab lunch this weekend? Sure, Dad, he said, cheerful. Got to teach the little guy how to ride his bike again. We laughed. I felt that old warmth return, a connection unbroken by secrets or lies. But beneath it, I carried the truth with me, carefully, like a book you keep on the top shelf. Not forbidden, just protected. Later, I went to the storage unit one last time. Everything was cleared out, the aux and contents gone, replaced by clean walls and echoes. I ran my hands along the edge of the locker door, felt the metal, felt the story, felt the weight of what had almost blown apart lives without anyone even realizing it. I didn't regret my moves. I didn't regret restraint. I only regretted how long it took me to see the full picture. How easy it was to assume the worst. How dangerous my own assumptions had been. But here's the thing. Life doesn't give you second chances at clarity. It gives you only the chance to move forward with what you now know. And I had that chance. As I drove home, the morning sun cutting through the windshield, I realized something essential. Revenge is a spark that burns fast. Mercy, even reluctant mercy, is a slow flame that warms you long after the fire's gone. I didn't know if she'd ever return. I didn't know if my son would ever need to know the whole truth. But I did know one thing: I'd done my best to hold the line between chaos and protection. And sometimes, that's enough. I parked in the driveway and sat a moment, watching the neighbor's dog chase its tail in the yard. The world kept spinning, life kept happening, and I was still here, steady, wounded, but still capable of choosing how to respond. And for the first time in months, I felt like I'd actually kept something precious intact, even if it was just my own sense of moral balance, even if it came at the cost of questions left unanswered, even if it hurt. That's life. And that's all anyone can hope for. I put the locket back on the shelf that night. Not hidden, not in a box, not locked away. Just resting there, catching the dim light from the lamp above. The metal was scratched, dull in spots, but it held weight. Not gold weight, but memory weight. Heavy enough to remind me of what I'd almost lost. I sat in the armchair, the one my wife used to claim as hers, and watched it for a long time. My son's laughter from earlier in the day echoed in my mind, blending with memories of the woman, the stranger, my maybe daughter who had briefly stormed into my carefully measured life. The locket became more than a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of secrets revealed and secrets withheld, of anger restrained, of love complicated, messy, and imperfect, of choices made not because they were easy, but because they were right, or at least less wrong than the alternative. I thought about the driveways, the police calls, the storage units, the bruises, and the fear. I thought about the temptation to act, to explode, to demand truth or revenge. I thought about the restraint that had saved my son from pain he didn't deserve, and the woman from exposure she hadn't asked for. The locket sat there, quiet, constant, patient, a reminder that life doesn't always give closure in the way you want. Sometimes, closure is just balance, a fragile, imperfect balance between truth, mercy, and survival. I reached out and ran my fingers over it, cold, solid, unmoving, and I smiled faintly, because that was enough. I didn't need a reunion. I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't need answers to every question. I only needed to know I had done right by the people I loved most, in the way I could. The locket would stay there, a silent witness. And maybe one day, someone else would see it and understand. For now, it was enough for me to simply live with it, to carry the weight without letting it crush me, to let life go on. Because some stories don't end with fireworks. Some end with a quiet object on a shelf, heavy with memory, and a heart learning to breathe again. And that, finally, was enough.